This is it, guys and gals. This is the last episode of season 1 of the Gutsy Media podcast. It has been a wild ride this first season. I've enjoyed it. I'm going to continue it. Just taking a few months off to get a good head start on season 2. I'm going to adjust a few things, I think, but it's going to be overall the same show that you're used to. Pretty excited about it. So we will see you back here in probably February. I'll make sure to put some announcements out there on social media. So make sure if you're not following me, Gutsy Media Podcast on Facebook, you definitely do so. Also subscribe, rate, review, share with your friends, get the word out there, and look forward to season 2. But that's not what you're here for right now. You're here for episode 12 of season 1. Got a real doozy for you today. My two bosses, Casey and Chris, owners and operators of Don't Forget a Towel, have decided to join me today to talk about 2018's dark comedy western crime drama starring John C. Reilly and Joaquin Phoenix, The Sisters Brothers. It was a great show. Really enjoyed recording with them. Really enjoyed them giving me the opportunity to do this podcast. And most of all, thanks for you guys for listening and giving me your feedback. I hope you enjoy. And now, on with the show. I'm excited. This is so exciting.
I love that movie. It was great.
Had you seen the movie prior to this?
No.
What about you, Casey? Have you saw it before?
Nope.
Me neither. What made you guys pick this movie? Just
Are you recording? Right? Oh, you are. Is this the beginning of the podcast? Is there an intro?
I like to just jump right in. It's just a normal conversation. We're just chit chatting. I'm just happen to be recording it.
Okay.
Casey came up with that list, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna throw some other movies at you. But I was like, wait, what movies are these? And once he said Western, I was sold. So that was my side of things.
Does the Western stem from your latest project?
No, it was before that even. It was probably maybe it inspired it even. I don't know.
I mean, Chris and I have liked Westerns for a long time.
So what struck me as odd about this is I remember seeing the previews. And I remember wanting to see the film. I personally love John C. Reilly, especially when he does the serious roles. And I remember that it looked like it was going to be like a gritty Western. And the trailer kind of pitched it as more of a comedy, or at least comedic parts. And what's interesting about it is that it's billed on most of the websites as a black comedy western crime drama.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It was definitely gritty and it was definitely funny. So it filled all those, it like checked off all those boxes for me, and that's why I think I really liked it a lot. It's a western because it kind of didn't fit the mold, but it definitely fit the mold of a western. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it definitely fit the mold as a western. I honestly didn't find very many parts funny. If anything, there were scenes with Joaquin Phoenix where I think he intended on kind of providing some comedic aspects of it. But so I should probably just let the cat out of the bag early, because I'm sure this is going to be a point of discontent for this episode. I am not a huge Joaquin Phoenix fan.
Wow.
I'm not a huge John C. Reilly fan.
Really?
But I I don't have anything against him. I just don't watch a lot of his movies. But when I do, I end up enjoying them. I'm like, why don't I watch more John C. Reilly? So
yeah, he's like
I
a
wouldn't really say
big
I'm
time
not a
theater
fan.
actor, right?
Is he? I don't know.
I think so. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure.
I mean, I just know him from Steve Brule and Step Brothers and, Talladega Nights. I mean, he does, Chicago. Like, he will do some serious stuff for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Joaquin Phoenix, to me, I think he's very one-dimensional. Now, with that being said, I mean he's got an extensive film career, and I think there are definitely films that he's in where he's exceptional. I mean, The Joker, which is the follow-up he does to this movie, um, is an amazing film, and is, in my opinion, one of the best films I've seen of all time. But I think he plays kind of the left of center than he did his main character in that movie. I don't know. He doesn't blow me away. And in this movie, he didn't blow me away. Luckily enough, I think there was enough supporting casts that I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was very well put together, especially for a modern-esque Western.
Yeah, both Gyllenhaal and Ahmed, both those roles I liked a lot. I liked it when I really like Riz Ahmed. I've really grown to like him since Rogue One. I think that he's a good actor, and also I've always liked Jake Gyllenhaal, and I think that having four characters kind of as the main characters carried the movie well, because jumping back and forth between the different situations and then eventually how they team up and whatever. But yeah, it was a really good character driven movie, I thought.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on this, and there's a lot of interviews about how the movie's put together and everything. Obviously, this is the director, and I'm gonna butcher his name, although I did try to look it up beforehand and memorize it. But Jacques Ardier. This is his first English film. He's a French director, which is ironic to me that he decided to pick a Western to be his first English film, which is probably the most English of American genres. But anyway, they did a lot of post production interviews and stuff like that, and the two groups of actors were actually split up during most of the filming, with John C. Reilly and Joaquin Phoenix, kind of being on that together on their own, developing their kind of chemistry, and then Jake Gyllenhaal and Riz Ahmed being kind of on their own end, and they weren't introduced together until the characters were introduced in the movie. Obviously, I'm sure they knew each other, just being in the same acting film career. But I thought that was kind of interesting. The other big crazy thing, in my opinion, is if you watch a lot of the post film promotional stuff they do, Joaquin Phoenix is filming the Joker at this point. He's skeleton thin. He takes very few questions. And he's oftentimes in the background of this group of actors doing press, giggling to himself and laughing and snickering for no reason. Like, he's not talking to anybody. And it's so creepy, especially to know what he goes on to do.
Method acting.
Yeah, he is a method actor. Yeah. I hated this movie.
No, you didn't. Really?
Totally did.
Why? What did you not like?
So boring. Didn't think it was funny. Didn't think it was a Western. Didn't think it was a drama. Like, it didn't hit any of those genres for me.
So I agree with you on the comedy part of it. There was a film critic who made the comment that even movies like Shawshank Redemption has laughs, but
every movie has laughs for sure.
Right. But they're more melancholy and tragic than anything else. And I think that film that fits this movie very well. It's very tragic, very melancholy. So I'll give you the not comedic thing. But to me, it was Western, through and through. Well, why didn't you not feel it was Western? What was it lacking, in your opinion?
I think as far as like the comedic thing, they tried. They straight up made jokes in the movie. Like, so the brothers joked between each other. So I do feel like there I just didn't laugh. Like, they made a joke. I didn't think it was funny, so I didn't laugh at it. But like, they tried to be funny. As far as like the Western side of things, I think what it was the actors. Like, to me, I can separate typically like Tom Cruise is gonna play the same person almost every time. But John C. Reilly, for example, I can see him switch. Or Jim Carrey, I can see him switch between, his darker roles and then his comedic roles. This one, I was just like, everyone just seems like they are. And I don't really see them acting to me. It seems like all these guys just got out in the West. They got the cameras put on them, and then they said their lines. But to me, it never felt like they got beyond the actors into the characters. To me, just my opinion on it.
I for one, I bought into the Western. Because now I live in the West, and so a lot of these locations they went to, especially when they got to California, I've been to and I'm familiar with now. And so, like when they go to the lake, Folsom Lake, there's a point where they go there. I've swam in that, and when you go in that water, there's like the fake gold, it glitters and all this stuff. So I guess maybe it was easier for me to kind of believe that. I can kind of see what you're saying about the actors and not buying into it to a certain extent because they're kind of well known, but they did sell it to me because I liked the storyline. I liked the dynamic between the two brothers and then also the dynamic between Ahmed and Gyllenhaal. And then when they got together, it created a whole nother dynamic. And then it just, they went on to, I guess, the whole MacGuffin of just getting to using that chemical and getting the gold. And I don't know, it was just, I don't know. I did enjoy it as a Western.
Yeah. So the film starts off and we got the two brothers, whose last name is Sisters, which, okay, great throwaway pun that they decided to make the entire movie about. But you have the Sisters brothers, which are Eli and Charlie, played by John C. Reilly and Joaquin Phoenix. And the movie starts off and it's dark and you just hear them talking and they're apparently trying to get some people to surrender. They work for a wealthy businessman known as the Commodore, who essentially hires them to be their muscle. I mean, this is like the Wild West Mafia. If you owe the Commodore money, these are the Sisters brothers are going to come collect. And they have a run-in. They kill some people, set fire to some stuff, and that's really it. They go back to the Commodore, check in more or less, and they get assigned this new mission, if you will, to find Herman Kermit Warm, played by Riz Ahmed, and they also get notified that they're going to be getting a third person, a private detective who is John Morris, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who, in my opinion, did a phenomenal job in this movie. I think Ahmed did a really good job. He's probably my number two, but to me, Jake Gyllenhaal carried this movie. My only question is, what accent was he doing?
Jake?
Like, was it English? Is it supposed to be an English accent?
He's supposed to be an English bounty hunter, is what I read.
But it doesn't quite.
It's slightly off. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not quite there. But so the first part of the film, the first act, kind of splits back and forth between Jake Gyllenhaal, who has, prior to the start of the film, kind of found Ahmed's character and is writing letters to the Sisters brothers saying, I found him. I'm going to track him. I'm going to follow him to California and we'll meet up there and we'll get him together. And then the Sisters brothers, who are having a very rough time trying to kind of catch up to Gyllenhaal's character and get this guy. And somehow Ahmed and Gyllenhaal befriend each other through kind of happenstance. And Ahmed reveals to him the real reason why the Commodore wants him, which is he has this hypothesis, because he's a chemist, to develop a formula that will allow you to get gold without really digging for it. You can just kind of pour the formula into the river and the gold will just illuminate like glow-in-the-dark sticks. And that is enough to persuade Gyllenhaal to kind of flip sides and say, screw it, I'll go with you, we'll make millions. And they had this whole conversation where they developed their own business logo, which I thought was a little, I guess if I'm going to be nitpicky about the movie, which I oftentimes am when I go into great detail about it, these guys go from complete strangers to business partners in like a 3-scene cut, which I think there could have been a little bit more development there, a little more trust connection. What do you guys think?
Money talks.
Yeah,
Gold.
I agree. And I don't think it was by happenstance that they became friends. It's because Gyllenhaal's tracking him. You know what I mean? Like he put himself in a situation to become friendly with Mr. Warm.
Well,
Like
see,
that.
I don't know about that. And the reason why I say that because when they first interact, Ahmed's character comes up to Gyllenhaal and is kind of like, "Hey, didn't I notice you at the last stop?"
Mhm.
And Gyllenhaal seems like he's almost trying to like play it off and push him away and like, no, yeah, I see lots of people, And it's not until Ahmed kind of keeps the conversation going where Gyllenhaal's like, all right, let me take this avenue and try to befriend you, pull you in a little bit so that you don't run away. That's the kind of the sense I got.
Yeah, I got it as Gyllenhaal was just kind of messing with him. Like this is his plan all along, is to put himself in a situation to make friends with him, and build his trust, and then also feed that information over to the sister brothers.
So you do get a scene before the sisters brothers leave the Commodore where you do see the Commodore in passing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who plays the Commodore in the movie?
I do.
I looked. I forgot already. Who is
It's
it?
it's Rutger Hauer.
Yes.
Which is
Because
insane.
Yes.
He's in the movie for 5 seconds, zero talking at all. And this is not, I don't think it's his last film, but he passes away less than a year away from the release of this movie.
Hey man, you remember Hobo with a Shotgun? Like that's Rutger Hauer. Like towards the end, a lot of these guys just start doing whatever. They just don't care. They're just like, you know what? I want to have fun. This sounds like a cool, like, $500 or whatever.
Well, I guess for me,
up.
I was more shocked that the director didn't take advantage of having such a great actor. I mean, why not give him a couple scenes where he could, at least a few lines where you can, I didn't even know it was him until I looked at the cast.
They could have been cut though. Like they
That's
could have
true.
shot more and just cut it.
So
I agree. I looked at IMDb and I was very surprised. And I was like, I'm going to go look back and look, but it was always the second time I watched the movie, so I decided against that.
Yeah, Carol Kane also makes a great cameo at the end, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
So do I. I think she's great. I've loved her since Scrooged.
Exactly.
So the sisters brothers have a couple encounters on the way to meet up with Ahmed and Gyllenhaal, and it becomes very evident that the Commodore has sent a few other people. Or no, excuse me. First, they run into Girl Mayfield, who has encountered Gyllenhaal and Ahmed and decided to send her own people after them. She also tries to take out the sisters brothers. That doesn't go very well because they're surprisingly good gunfighters. Like their characters are kind of projected as like Joaquin Phoenix's character, Charlie Sisters, is an alcoholic, and John C. Reilly's character, at least in my opinion, didn't seem to be all that intelligent. You kind of, in the in-between scenes, you get this premise that they're like, befuddled little criminals who don't know, their ass from a hole in the wall. But when it comes to the actual gunfight scenes, they're very well done. I mean, they take at least 3 different times throughout the movie. The two of them take on, 5+ people and do it with no problem, really.
Yeah.
So, which kills me because none of this plays into the Westerns for you.
Just because you put a gun in someone's hand doesn't make him a cowboy.
Well, so what would make this Western? I mean, okay, so they're in the West, gold rush.
Yeah.
They're in the right outfits. They're the gunfighters. I mean, they're going to saloons. What aspect of a Western are they missing?
It's not even, like I said, it's not that. Like all of that's good, and we haven't talked about the soundtrack yet, but we probably will. At least I'll talk about it. But like to me, Robin Hood Men in Tights, is that like a period piece? You know what I mean? Like just because you dress it up to look like what you're going for, but at the same, it doesn't. To me, it never hit that Western feel. Like I'm not especially a big fan of the remake of True Grit by the Coen brothers, and I know most people are. It like got a Academy Award nomination and stuff like that. But even though I didn't like it, it feels like a Western. What Quentin Tarantino does, despite what Quentin Tarantino says in all his films, Hateful Eight, Django Unchained feel like a Western. Now you got Ennio Morricone doing the soundtrack for those movies. Like, I get it. No one else is going to be able to make music like that man and make you feel like you're in a Western like that man. But at the same time, it's just like there was I don't know. It's just like a feeling of being in a Western. They're always slower a little bit, Tombstone, Quick and the Dead, completely different. Sam Raimi, like those shots are Sam Raimi shots. You know what I mean? Like, he has a way of quick cutting and quick editing and quick shooting that doesn't look like a lot of other directors out there. But I still felt like I am in a Western. For some reason, this movie, and like I said, it to me, it really came down to the acting, because we'll talk about it later. Cinematography-wise, that's Western. I mean, there were shots in there that I was like, damn, this looks like it's grainy. You know what I mean? Like, It really looks like that. But as soon as the actors started going into their things again, I just got shut off, and I was like, ugh, all right, let's see what they're going to talk about now. It was just, I couldn't connect with them.
Did you watch Westworld?
Seen first season.
Did you think that was Western?
I mean, I've
Sci-fi
seen a movie,
Western.
Yeah.
It's hard. That's a hard question. And I also don't know if, say, like bringing Robin Hood Men in Tights compared to this movie, saying, that's a fine comparison, but it's kind of weird to me too. But outside the actors, the fact that you bring up the cinematography, I mean, it is a gorgeously filmed movie, and I think just that alone did it for me. Plus the soundtrack, like you said, and it was like maybe these big name actors are the one thing that could hinder, like, maybe anybody from watching getting it, into it completely. But I'm just kind of baffled by your opinion, but I love your opinions as well, so it's all good.
You're a big soundtrack guy. I am not. I don't really pay attention to the soundtrack. I mean, to me, the soundtrack is one of those elements where if it's bad, I'll notice it, but if it's good, I won't. And that's kind of, I mean, maybe that's what makes a good soundtrack, is not noticing it. But honestly, I couldn't tell you anything about the soundtrack. I don't remember a single sound that was uttered. But like with what I just said, that's probably because it was a good soundtrack. I mean, you're the soundtrack guy. Was it a good soundtrack to you?
So yeah, well, let me back up though. Do you know the theme song to Star Wars or Indiana Jones?
Of course. But those are cult classics. Those are built into the pop culture of the last 20 years of my life, and I've also heard those songs 16,000 times. I mean, you can't compare Star Wars to the Sisters Brothers.
But there was a time when Star Wars was a little independent movie that happened to get an amazing soundtrack that has built into our minds for the last 45 years. But at the time, like the soundtrack to movies nowadays are not always as elevated as something that a John Williams does. Every once in a while you get like the Avengers theme that most people do know now, but it is a big problem in society as a whole, or cinematography, or as a whole, that we don't
problem in society.
I do think so. Like, I could sing you the Goonies theme song right now. You know what I mean? Because it was a pumped thing. Everyone knew what it was, and now they don't focus on those things as much.
But in the 90s. And
well, the 90s
song soundtracks.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like, I get it. I have to agree with Casey, because one of the biggest things for Star Wars, we're getting off track with Star Wars, but the biggest thing for like Star Wars and those movies are the soundtracks. I
love tangents, by all means.
So it's those like listening to the music brings me back to the movies, and vice versa. It's like, if it wasn't like, would this movie be the same without John Williams? No. Here, I was also impressed. His name is what? Alexandre Desplat. Is that who he is?
He is phenomenal. This guy, I've loved his stuff for a long time. Typically, a little bit on the French side of things, but if you listen to what he did for The Imitation Game, I think he won an Oscar for that. Grand Budapest Hotel. Recently, he did win one for The Shape of Water. I don't know, Argo. I mean, Harry Potter. Like, we could go through like a lot of Wes Anderson stuff too. Like, he just does amazing work, and he was actually attached to I want to say Solo or one of the recent Star Wars movies, and the timing didn't work out. But yeah, he does a really good job. So the music in this movie was one of the things that I was like, okay, this feels like, and he's not known for Westerns either. It was kind of funny, like, and maybe again, that's another thing that took me out of it, is that nobody was attached to a Western in any way. And
Right.
like, all these elements came together to say, we're making a Western. And I never once, like, True Grit, I'll bring it up again. When Jeff Bridges puts on Jeff Bridges' voice, he just feels like
right.
that. Or like Sam Elliott. Like, that dude can be in the most modern of times, and he still looks like a cowboy from the 1850s. You know what I mean? Like, so that's all I'm saying, is like, sometimes you get that feeling of, I am in a Western. And to your point of Westworld, like, what's her name? Rachel, the main girl there.
Mm-hmm.
Wood.
Yeah, like, she's just freaking fantastic job. And you feel like, at least in those scenes, like, her character's really delivering on that. So all these guys, to me, just like showed up on a set that looked like the Westerns, but it never to me felt like it.
So the sisters brothers end up catching up with Ahmed and Jake Gyllenhaal's character, and they have this interesting kind of meetup. So the Gyllenhaal and Ahmed kind of get the drop on them and wind up capturing them. They get them handcuffed, and unfortunately, they're also ambushed by a couple other of the Commodore's men, because the Commodore has sent more people after Ahmed, and they're forced to kind of team up, the four of them, to fight off these other guys. They do, and it builds just the right amount of ounce of trust that they need it to kind of have the conversation of, we have this idea. We have this thing that we can do. We can all become rich. Let's make it happen. They successfully convinced the sisters brothers to abandon the Commodore's mission of killing Ahmed or torturing him for the recipe. And instead they work together. And you had this kind of time-lapse montage, which I can only assume a week goes by-ish. I kind of got the sense that it was at least a couple days. And John C. Reilly's character, Eli's sisters, winds up befriending Gyllenhaal's character kind of more so than the rest of the group bond, which is also important to note that around the same time, the two brothers are kind of having this, I don't want to say quarrel, but Eli's had enough. You know, he's kind of, we've saved up enough money. It's time to move on to the next part of our life. Let's slow down. He talks about opening a little store or something. Whereas Joaquin's character, Charlie's sisters, he's more into, let's keep this going. Let's keep this going, and let's go back and kill the Commodore and take his place.
Yeah.
And become the mafia boss. So they're having this, I don't want to say falling out, but it's clear to both of them that they have different paths forward, and they're not really sure what's going to happen after this. So you kind of see this divide happening, which is at this point where I thought the movie was going to go. I thought it was going to go to these two brothers kind of being on opposite sides of the barrel, if you will.
This is after Mayfield, right?
Yeah, so this is kind of really where the plot starts to really build. They're getting the stuff together to try Ahmed's recipe for the first time, and look for some gold. And I think this is where I was really getting into it, and it's really getting good for me.
One of my favorite scenes is when John C. Reilly is brushing his teeth at the river, and then Gyllenhaal comes down, and he's like kind of sharing a moment there, and Gyllenhaal's just like kind of shaking his head, like, what's wrong with you? But those little moments like that are great. But yeah, so Mayfield sends men after them, so they're like a couple of days ahead. So yeah, that whole scene, like you said, must have been under a week. The breakdown of Charlie is kind of what I expected from Phoenix in the first place, playing that kind of that crazy character. You could see it from the beginning, delusions of grandeur, definitely mental illness, and then you have Reilly, who plays Eli and the big brother, who seems to be like this guiding force, right? And you kind of look at him like, well, he's not that smart, but at the same time, it's like he's like the more compassionate one. And so you follow like this degrading, I guess, downward slope of the relationship until you get to the point where he reveals what happened in their childhood, and Eli tells that story, and he's like, well, it should have been me, but it was Charlie who shot our father and killed him, and had, so you start to really see that at that point, and why Charlie is the way he is, and all of a sudden you see more of that, like that caringness of Eli. So I thought that as much as they were starting to move apart, there's this part of Eli being the caring brother that he is, that he wouldn't abandon Charlie if things got even to the worst. He could get to the worst. And then of course everything that happens with the chemical. So
yeah. There's a scene where John C. Reilly or Eli and Charlie are talking to one another, and so Charlie is an alcoholic. He drinks throughout the film. There's actually quite a few scenes where the next morning he struggles to kind of ride his horse because he's throwing up and he's kind of this hangover.
Yeah.
And they also talk several times throughout the movie about their father and how their father was, a raging lunatic, alcoholic, and so on. And there's a scene where Charlie, Joaquin Phoenix character, says, "Our father was stark raving mad, and we have his foul blood in us." And Eli replies with, "Our father was a drunk, Charlie." And to me, it was kind of a throwaway scene. I think it might have been an attempt for humor, but it also shines a direct light on the fact that our father was screwed up because he was a drinker, just like you are, just like you're a drinker. And I think it was the attempt to kind of paint Charlie's character in the same spotlight as the crazy father they've been talking about this whole time.
All this top 40 music is so boring. Geez, I sure wish I had something geeky to listen to.
Well, I've got just the thing for you, stranger.
Who are you and how did you get in my house?
Don't even worry about that. If you're looking for the latest, greatest, and geekiest podcast around, you should check out Those Geeks You Know.
Those Geeks You Know? Wow! 3 friends talking about comic books, movies, TV shows, all the things that I geek out about. But seriously, you gotta leave now.
Be sure to check out Those Geeks You Know on iTunes and Stitcher. You can also like us on Facebook and Twitter and tell everybody that you know.
You gotta leave. I called the cops.
It's like a real deep dive into this movie. Yeah.
So you, at this point, are you checked out? I mean, are you?
Yeah, for sure.
At what point did you check out? What was the scene that was like, okay, I can't do this?
What time did you watch this movie?
It was real early on. I'm going to be 100% honest. I watched it over the course of the time that we decided to do it. So last 3 weeks, I just slogged and dug my way through this film.
10 minutes at a time.
Yeah, really, honestly, that's how it was.
That's great.
Well, I'm glad I didn't pick this movie.
I know. I was like, there's multiple times where I was like, well, Chris already told me he watched it twice, so I can't suggest another movie. So I better get through this thing.
I'm glad you suggested it.
Hey,
I'm glad you didn't like it too. Actually, it's a good debate.
Yeah,
it makes sure more than we agree on everything.
I agree.
Yeah, true.
So they get to the point where they finally have the chemical done, and they dilute it a little bit. They pour it into the river, and they wait a second and they stir it up. And now at this point, all four men are in the river with this chemical, and the gold starts shining. So they start just scooping the gold out, quick, scoop the gold out. And then there's a couple lines where Ahmed's character says, if your hands start burning, go take a break. And you have them kind of going in and out of the river. They're washing their hands and arms, and then they're going back and scooping a few more, and they're coming out washing their hands and arms. And Charlie says at one point he's left in the river by himself because he's the only one that's like, I'm gonna take this for as long as I can. And he says it's starting to fade. The gold's starting to go away. So they're like, okay, well, I mean, we'll just try again later, not a big deal. And Charlie's like, nope. And he goes and he grabs the giant bucket full of the original chemicals, the non-diluted stuff, and decides that he's going to take it upon himself to go to this kind of makeshift dam that they've created and pour the rest of it in. And at this point, all three of the other guys start freaking out. No, Charlie, don't do it. He slips, pours the chemical all over his arm and into the river, where the other men are kind of rushing up to him. So they get like the blunt of this undiluted chemicals. And this is where the movie kind of gets real dark, in my opinion. Because you have Jake Gyllenhaal's character who gets doused pretty heavily with the chemical. It fast forwards to the next morning. He's basically lying on the ground. He's struggling to talk. He's got chemical burns all over his body, and he convinces John C. Reilly's character to hand him a pistol, and he kills himself because he just cannot take the pain. In the tent, in their campsite, Ahmed is lying in the bed. He's able to speak, but he is completely blind and also has chemical burns all over his body. And he is talking to Joaquin Phoenix's character, and it's very evident that he is not aware of where he is or who he's talking to. I believe he thinks he's talking to Eli or Ahmed. I'm not really sure. And he ends up dying as well.
Yeah. I don't want to correct you, but the John C. Reilly was in the tent with him. And then Charlie gives that guy the gun.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes more sense.
Because it was like, you could see the compassion from Eli. He was there, and he wanted to make sure that Harm, was comfortable. I mean, Harm puts him, goes in the water to save Gyllenhaal's character, and it was like, you've known this guy for how long? You know what this stuff does. So that was actually kind of like, wow, you're gonna sacrifice. You know what this sacrifice is. You're gonna save your friend. And that was just like you said, it got so dark at that point, and it was sad because it was all brought about by Charlie's irrational decisions and just being kind of that unstable character, and how it just kind of ruins everything for not only himself and Eli but everybody around them. He's like this Calamity Jane character, and it's like,
well put.
Yeah, it was so messed up because they got to the point where they had their goal, they had their gold, and it would have been great. They could have just waited the next day, but that Joaquin Phoenix.
That Joaquin Phoenix, you know him. Yeah, and I mean, at this point, the movie kind of races to the end. It's almost like, it's just, you put on the burners and let's go. The sisters brothers go back to town. Joaquin Phoenix gets his burned arm chopped off because it's so mangled and he's in so much pain. While literally moments after this happens, John C. Reilly fights off 5 guys in the town center that the Commodore has sent after them. Because at this point, they haven't come back. The Commodore thinks that they've just vanished, which they pretty much did. John C. Reilly knows that they're not going to be able to go very far unless they handle the Commodore. So they go back to wherever they started off, and come to find out the Commodore's passed away on his own. They really don't have any place to go, so they go back home where they meet their mom for the first time in the movie, played by Carol Kane, the legendary film actress. And then you have this kind of quick montage of them hanging out with their mom and taking a bath and eating dinner and just being kids again, and that's it. I mean, the last act in this movie is like a marathon.
It's a huge like status quo change back to a comfort zone, right? And so that kind of threw me, because you wouldn't expect that in this movie. You would expect a big shootout, maybe they die or whatever. I really thought that John C. Reilly had died in that shootout in the street, because they don't show, like, of course they don't show anything, so he's not dead. But then when they show him and he's like such a badass, and then it just kind of goes from there. And then it's like, oh wait, everything's good again. So that kind of threw me for a loop at the end. I liked it. But I'm also for like those grand shootouts where nobody survives and the sun sets, whatever.
Right.
or the heroes right off into the sunset, whatever. It was a very change of pace ending for the entire movie, I felt.
I think that at that turn, again, because they had thrown in so much comedy in which Westerns typically don't have that much comedy. Maybe a throwaway line here, you know what I mean? Maybe Clint Eastwood says something badass to make it kind of funny, you know what I mean? But like Quentin Tarantino obviously will throw in some jokes, but I guess to me at that point of them getting the gold and all that, I was like, what are you trying to do? Because this would not happen in a Western. And then as it races through the ending, okay, shootouts, yes, classic. You know what I mean? And there was some different shots like out in like a plane and like in the dark. And, there was some cool, again, cinematography-wise, great stuff there. But I just felt so much like this is just not what I was expecting. Not in a good way for me.
So you made several comments to all the comedy in the movie. It's funny that you say that, because I think the exact opposite. I mean, what comedy are you referring to? What are you had the gag with the toothbrush, that he gets the toothbrush, doesn't really know how to use it, but even then it's not really like, to me it wasn't an attempt for a joke. It was more of an attempt to put him in that time period. Here's a brand new invention. Other than that, and you also have that one alley scene where the brothers are like, he hits the brother and they have this kind of joke of, I didn't hit you with a shovel, which was kind of a throwaway scene in my opinion. But what other comedy?
I can distinctly remember like at the end where they're going to go and like kill the Commodore, and then they get to the funeral home and he's dead. And they're like, oh, hey, there's really no one else here who are going to come to see him. Can we close the casket? And then like Joaquin Phoenix is like, so that's kind of disappointing. And John C. Reilly is like, yup. And I was like, okay, this is a scene built for comedy.
The very beginning of the movie is also darkly funny.
Yes.
With the horses, the whole horse barn thing is darkly funny to me. And maybe that's more my sense of humor as well. Maybe why I found some of it funnier. But those kind of situations where they're just like holy crap, like this is kind of the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah.
And then they kind of make light of it, and it's just I don't know. I'm not looking for funny ha ha ha. I'm looking for more like I can snicker at something because it's darkly funny. Another scene is like the whole spider thing. Gross and also darkly funny. It's just like, it made me think like, this is why I wasn't sleeping out in a tent when I'm camping out here most of the time. Now I do more, but I'm zipping it up, making sure, so I'm not sleeping outside. But all these kind of situations kind of can get a laugh.
Yeah, that was a sight gag, with the bubbled up face. Like that's a sight gag, straight up.
I forgot about that. Yeah, the whole spider thing. See, and that's the thing. Maybe dark comedy just doesn't register with me, because this isn't the only film that I've watched that was like quote unquote dark comedy, where some of these things I'm like, to me, that's not an attempt to be funny. To me, it's just an attempt to like explain the West. And yeah, it's dangerous. There's spiders out here that honestly, I thought So there's a scene where he is sleeping and a spider crawls into his mouth and he winds up eating it or swallowing it or whatever. And then for the next part of the ride, he's ill. His face swells up. I think he gets sick a few times. And I think they actually show a scene where he spits up like cobwebs, which I thought he was going to die. I thought that was going to be where they took it, where he dies and Charlie barely makes it to the other two. And obviously, they didn't go that route, but I don't know. That must have just gone over my head. I didn't see any of those scenes as being funny. I saw them as more playing into the characters and the character development.
Yeah, I can be kind of a dark individual sometimes. But no, I also like that scene because it also showed Charlie does care about his brother. He did somewhat take care of him the best he could for being somebody of his mindset. So yeah, it did give kind of like this insight into the fact that the brothers do care about each other. But then again, maybe I just laugh at things that I shouldn't be laughing at.
I do think the ending.
I think they were intended to be funny.
Okay.
I mean, it's labeled as a dark comedy. I would imagine that you're right. The ending to me is what kept this movie from being great rather than just good. I think that if they had slowed down the pace a little bit, if they had so many these little threads throughout the movie they could have pulled on with the Commodore. They could have elaborated on that and that kind of conflict more. I think they could have done more with the brothers and the future they were going to have, and them parting ways or even becoming enemies. It was the whole premise of the chemical burns and everybody basically dying and having this kind of dark ending was like a left turn. And I'm not saying it didn't work. I'm just saying I don't think it was the best option for an ending, because you didn't see any of these little threads pay off at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed.
100%.
So the movie comes out it premieres in Venice Film Festival September 2nd, 2018, goes wide release the 21st of September. It's approximately 121 minutes or just over 2 hours. Film budget of $38 million, which is insane. Winds up only box officing about 13 million. So critical failure in every aspect of the word, really, which is sad to me because the movie is based on a novel by the same name, written from Eli's perspective, in the first person perspective. Before the book was released, John C. Reilly's wife gets a hold of the manuscript, winds up reading it. They option the movie rights. This is in 2011. She and him are producers on the movie. So this is largely John C. Reilly's, well, at least his wife's project. And I think it doesn't surprise me that it wasn't like a critically acclaimed like Oscar winner, but I am a little upset to see it not do as well as I think it should have. I mean, 13 million on a $38 million budget is grossly underperforming for a movie that I thought was entertaining.
So that was the first time I ever heard of the movie, was when Casey sent that list. So that says one thing about it, I believe. I had no idea it existed. So, and at the same time, it won 10 awards across different film festivals and whatnot, and was nominated 22 times. So I have a really hard time with movies going to the theater these days, because I feel like the theater is kind of at its tipping point, especially now. Where did this movie cost that much because of the star power? Is that
yeah? I mean
thing?
that's a really good point. I mean, you have a lot of big names in the movie, especially above the title. It also filmed in like 3 different locations that aren't close together: Spain, North America, France, Romania. So, I mean, they moved around quite a bit as well, which can't be cheap.
Yeah, I mean, 38 million is still considered a low budget movie, and the actors themselves probably all did it at a smaller amount. And here's the thing: even though they're known actors, I'd say Jake Gyllenhaal and now Joaquin Phoenix are probably the two biggest of the group. You know, and I think like they probably all agreed to not get paid as much, but it was probably like costumes, moving. You know what I mean? The
Now,
music.
keep in mind, this is Gyllenhaal pre-Spider-Man. Spider-Man's the next film he's on.
Yeah, but Jake Gyllenhaal has been a quote unquote leading man for a long time. He's led his own movies for a long time now. Ever since Donnie Darko, like he doesn't need like there's certain actors like Riz Ahmed, he needs somebody else to be in the movie who's somewhat of a name for anyone to go, oh yeah, I know that guy. John C. Reilly, he could probably lead his own movie, but he typically doesn't either. So you know what I mean? It's like Joaquin Phoenix, the movies that he does lead, with the exception of The Joker, are all indie movies. You know what I mean? Like think about the last time you saw a Joaquin Phoenix movie. What was it? That wasn't
Gladiator.
Okay, exactly. So you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm saying. Like they're not huge actors.
No, I think you're right. I think so Joaquin goes on to do Joker, Gyllenhaal goes on to do Spider-Man. John C. Reilly goes on to do Holmes and Watson, which utterly bombs. I don't know. All in all, I think the movie was interesting. I do think, in my opinion, Gyllenhaal is the best actor in the movie. I liked his character. I had more invested in his character than I did any other character. I don't know. It was a good movie. It was entertaining. I had higher hopes for it going in.
I love John C. Reilly, and I usually, like I said, I don't really follow a lot of his movies because I don't watch a whole lot of comedy. But his character I really liked because I like that nice guy character. I do. I always do, and I think that when they're struggling against like the Tide or Joaquin Phoenix. I feel their challenge and everything he went through when he lost his horse. I was super sad. I was able to really relate to him in a lot of ways, also with his brother. But I really liked his role in that movie, and I thought that I'm glad that you shared that information about that. It was kind of like a passion project for his wife and him, and you can see that that kind of paid off in the end.
I was going to say that I know you like to shit on theater sometimes, but if this movie didn't go to the theater, it would not even have made as much money as it did. Because
100%.
You didn't know about it. I was the only one of the three of us who did. And if it, like, the general audience has no idea what this movie is. You know what I mean? And this would have gotten hidden on, we watched on Hulu. It would have been hidden on Hulu where without searching for it, it's not popping up on anyone's like must watch list.
But that's my point about the theater now, is that you have all these streaming services. People are they're putting money behind it. Why go and make a movie and throw these big stars in it when you can do it probably for a streaming, these days now, smarter idea. But you're right that it has to make that movie in the theater that way. But there are, as we've spoken about at length, there are other ways to go around that.
Right.
Here's the issue, in my opinion, for why theaters are still relevant in an era where everything is digital. I mean, look at the CD industry, not the CD industry, but the music industry. They went from CDs to iTunes, quickly. I think the reason is because the price point. I can pay $7, $10, depending on when I go, for a movie ticket, or Mulan just dropped and I got to pay $30 to watch it at home. It's a significantly different price point, and I think if you kept the digital downloads at the same $7 ticket price as a movie or $10 ticket price as a movie, then you're going to be more apt to sit comfortably in your pajamas on your couch, make some popcorn in the microwave, and just watch the movie. And now, and by that I mean, the basic moviegoer. There are definitely people like us who enjoy the cinematic experience and the 3D IMAX huge event that it is going to the movies, but that's not your standard moviegoer.
The argument against the $30 charge is that if somebody's going to take their family to the movie, you're going to spend that much or more.
Take you and your boys and your wife.
Right.
That's already $30 just to go to the theater.
$30 right there is that ticket price that they're making that up for the loss of XYZ, whatever.
And
but
I get
if
that.
they're only charging, yeah, right. But if they're only charging $7 and you're watching it with your friends, that's only $7, So I just
but that's
argument is. Yeah,
that's my issue. I get that that's their thought process is, I'm gonna charge you $30 because you're gonna get 3 or 4 people together and you're essentially paying the same price. But when we go see a movie premiere and 5 of us meet up at the theaters, that's not what's gonna happen. I'm not gonna call 5 friends and say, "Hey, come over, everybody chip in $5 and we'll rent the movie on digital."
But instead, that's what people do for think about pay-per-view.
I think it's different. It's different. It's not the same experience. When I'm getting a pay-per-view, I'm a huge UFC fan. When I rent a pay-per-view, I am getting my buddies together. We're going to get a case of beer and a pizza, and we're going to watch the UFC. And the entire time, we're going to be cheering and screaming, and oh my God, this is crazy. You don't do that during movies. You sit there quietly and you watch. And that is a more intimate thing. I'm not inviting my buddies over to turn off the lights and cuddle on my couch and watch a movie.
It's not watch Endgame?
Maybe me and my wife, maybe the kids if it's a kid-friendly movie, but that's kind of about it.
We also have to look at this. We live in a way different world now where if you I choose not to go to the theater because I'm not going to the theater. But I am very saddened that I can't go to the theater. I want to see Tenet. I want to see Wonder Woman 84. I want to see these movies on the big screen because that's where you want to see them. And that's my argument against watching at home until you get that projector or that 100-inch screen TV, whatever. But you can create that at home, I think, too. So there's these counter arguments about what's right for you individually as a moviegoer and what you would go and see. I think that there's an option for everyone. And if the movies do go back to being where everyone can go to the theaters again or whatever, then I think they should still charge that much at home if people want to choose to stay home and watch it. Make more money, So that's my argument.
So the one last thing I want to say before we move on to the 5 questions segment is the final sequence where the brothers go back to mom. You have them walking into the house. They have this dinner scene, and I'm not no particular order. They have this dinner scene. They have this bathtub scene where they're washing up, and I think they're hanging out on the porch at some point. And there's just these different cuts. The entire final sequence was shot in one single continuous take. The actors would go off screen and switch costumes and then come back on and recreate these leaps in time for the closing segment, which I thought was really cool. I also thought was completely unnecessary, but it was still pretty cool, I thought.
I love one shot whenever you see it. It's the greatest thing ever in cinematography.
Me and Will, I want to say it's episode 2 of season 1, did Birdman, which is just phenomenally shot with these long continuous scenes, which I think is what makes that movie so tremendous.
Yeah, that movie was shot intentionally to look like it was one take. The entire movie is meant to look like one take. That's weird. I didn't even notice. I didn't even pay attention to it being all one shot, and I thought it was just they came home one day and she was like, "Let me give you a bath and rub your stubby arm." And
you were done by that point, right?
I was so checked out.
Okay, so we do a couple different segments here on the show. One of them is I've come up with 5 questions.
Do you have music yet for this?
Not yet. Maybe in season 2. We'll see. We're developing this.
Just saying, it happens on other shows and works. And don't have to do it on this one.
I love this is actually my yearly review for my 2 bosses. So this is great. So I've come up with 5 questions that I think loosely apply to pretty much every movie in some way, shape, or form. And I'd like to get your guys' take when it pertains to the Sisters Brothers. Right. First question is, what aspect of the storytelling was done right? and which aspects were done wrong, and who do you give credit to? We'll start with Casey. Go ahead.
Well, as I've mentioned, the comedy was not done right, in my opinion, and the feeling of a Western wasn't done right. And I would blame the producers on that one. And the reason why is because I'm assuming the book feels more like a Western. And John C. Reilly's wife was like, let's adapt this book, not from Eli's perspective, but from the, not even from their, it's an outward perspective at that point of the whole story, because they also focused on Jake Gyllenhaal and Riz Ahmed. So they decided to change what the core book's perspective was as it was, and do what they did with this movie. So, cinematographer, he did just fine. Alexander Desplat, great. The director, maybe too. Maybe he even did a really good job. But something got lost for me in the translation of the writing. I didn't read the book. I never will, but that's what I'm assuming where the breakdown came from.
I mean, you never know that you might love the book.
I could. Maybe I'll be like, well, this sounds great.
But turn into a movie. Chris, what do you think?
I liked the pacing. I thought that it carried itself well from start to finish. I liked the character development a lot. The cinematography was beautiful, as we've talked about. But like Case just said, I think that it would have been nice from a first-person point of view if John C. Reilly was narrating the movie from a certain point, just kind of giving us some insight, maybe, because you get a lot of inner dialogue in a book, so you lose that in translation. So I find that inner dialogue is very important when it comes to telling a story and also getting a character's point across. So, like Casey said, watching it from the outside is great and all. You're watching a movie, but are you really getting the true message of the movie? Yes, no. But I did enjoy it. Again, honestly.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think a lot of movies struggle when it comes to adapting book to film with the inner dialogue part of it, because it's so difficult to naturally present inner dialogue in a movie that you do lose a lot of the storytelling that way, especially if the book is told in like kind of a first person narration. Okay, great. So question 2, what is the biggest unanswered question for you about the movie, and do you think it was done intentionally? Let's start with Chris this time.
My question is, what happened to that chemical compound? Did it ever come back again? Did it die with harm? Because he had the formula. So I liked that aspect of the movie a lot. And I really wanted to kind of have, I guess, a little more an idea if anything was ever, taken from that. But I'm gonna assume no. I would like to see what happened to Mayfield, the town, after they got rid of Mayfield.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you think the chemical thing was done intentionally? To leave that as like a cliffhanger?
I feel like that batch was the last one anyhow, and when he dumped it, that's it. That was all that was made by, and I don't think it was ever mentioned if Harm wrote anything down. Perhaps he did, and that could be used as something else down the road. But I, for one, kind of would like to know if that was ever used in reality.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And if I can get my hands on that formula today.
maybe the Sisters Brothers 2. The return of the formula.
Yeah.
The secret of the ooze.
I'd love it.
Casey, what do you think?
What happened to the Commodore, man? How'd he die?
Ooh. Spin-off.
Where's the prequel series? Commodore's rise to the roost. But yeah, like that was one thing where I was just kind of like, same thing with John C. Reilly. It's like, oh, this, okay.
It just is what it is, I guess.
That's it. Another playing for laughs.
Okay, question 3. Personal connection is important. Was there anything that happened in the movie that reminded you of a real life story that happened to you? Let's start with Casey.
And my dad, I shot him.
Jesus.
No. I mean, I have a sister, and sometimes we get into arguments.
that's the extent of it. Never
And
went east with her and decided to mine for gold.
decided to do that, and never put in fake British accents like Jake Gyllenhaal did. Honestly, like, have I drank too much and tried to get on a horse? Maybe that. That's probably it. Yeah.
I gotta hear that story at some point. Maybe the company Christmas party. Go ahead, Chris.
I got so my dog is reaching older age, and he's been having these eye infections, and so I've been having to take care of him. And then when what's the horse name? Oh,
Jesse.
no, it's a much goofier name. But when John C. Reilly's horse gets sick after the bear swipes its face and gets that eye infection, I got kind of choked up at that point of the movie. So I was like, oh man. So
Yeah,
that hit
It is a
home.
rough scene.
That was rough.
And then also just kind of like, dealing with addiction. It's just like it hits us all, and the thing that dealing with that and seeing like the breakdown of Joaquin Phoenix, it was just it's for me, from my perspective, seeing that opens my eyes a lot to things that I deal with. And just, I that's what I love about movies and stories, is that it gives you these situations that you can relate to and just, either take from it or leave it. So, yeah.
Interesting. Question 4. What is the most important sequence in the movie? I forgot who we went with. So let's go with Casey. I don't know who we went with the first one.
The most important, I probably at the turn when with the chemical burns and him deciding to make that move to hastily try to get all that money, and it screwed everybody. I mean, everybody from then on. So that was, for me, that was the most important part, because that was the part that really like put the rest of the movie in motion, and you realize that nothing good, other than seeing their mom at the end, really came from all of that.
For me, it was when the Sisters Brothers were captured by Harm and Gyllenhaal. I'll just mix up their names, just crisscross them. But so they capture them, they have them tied up, and they don't trust them. And all of a sudden, Mayfield's trappers show up, and they get in that confrontation.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, let us free, we'll help you. And at that point, it's like, are the Sister Brothers going to shoot, like take these guys out, and then take out the two, and then bring their bounty in? So you don't really know where that's going to turn at that point. Can they trust the Sisters Brothers? And so they do end up letting them free. They do the shootout, they take out the trappers, and then from there it just, it kind of, that whole, the four of them go on from that. But that was a turning point for me, because it showed that the Sister Brothers were not just these mercenaries,
Thugs.
Yeah. And it was like they also maybe had goals for themselves, and that getting this gold would be beneficial. So for me, that was just where everybody came together at that point. That did it for me.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, because at that point in the film, I mean, it could really go one of two ways. They could team up and go after the gold, or the brothers could just take them out and go back to the Commodore and collect their winnings. So yeah, that's a good point. Okay, last question. If you could recast 2 roles in the film, what roles would they be? Who would you recast in them, and why? Let's start with Chris.
Jude Law should have played Gyllenhaal's role.
Ooh.
Definitely. I don't know.
Why Jude Law?
The accent, and
Just a
that was the
better
only
English
person I came up with. Like,
That's it.
like Jude Law and Jake Gyllenhaal, they exist in the same plane for me. So just kind of that same cabal of actors from that time period. But Yeah, that's what came into my mind. But you know what? The rest, everybody else, even Joan, they all did it for me. I really, maybe somebody else than John C. Reilly, but then again, I really liked his role in this movie. So I don't know. I can't really replace anybody else. That's my only one.
What about you, Casey?
So Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly are replaced by Jeff Bridges and Sam Elliott.
Just to make it more of a Western?
Hey, you tell me that movie wouldn't be 10 times better with the two of them in there. Older brothers, yeah, sure, but hell, man, I'd watch Sam Elliott act outside of a paper bag. I love that guy.
Sounds like the sequel.
Yeah,
They're much older.
exactly.
I could see Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie somewhere. I mean, maybe either as Gyllenhaal's character or Joaquin's
Commodore.
character. Yeah. I'm picturing him from The Revenant, and I think that's kind of like that Western feel, and I could see that playing out really well.
Yeah, that movie. Oh man.
Talk about a brutal man. I can't believe the Bear won the Academy Award for that.
He deserved it.
So one of my favorite things to do on this show is a little game I like to call Guess That Tomato, where I have my guest guess the Rotten Tomatoes score for the movie. As you know, Rotten Tomatoes has two scores. They have the critic score and the audience score. And I will leave it up to you guys to guess either one if you want. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go around. You guys guess the score. Then I'm going to give you a little hint, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to change your guess if you'd like. So let's start with Casey. What do you guess is the score on Rotten Tomatoes for The Sisters Brothers?
I'm going to guess the audience score 37%.
Wow. Okay, Chris?
Audience score 53%, and critic. I can say the critic one now.
You can do both if you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
I'm going to say the critics is like 83%.
Okay. And
Critics, wait, hold on. Critics, I'll say 71.
All right. And here is the hint I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you 3 films that are within 2% of the audience score. So these films have similar scores to The Sisters Brothers. Are you ready? Film number 1, Terminator Dark Fate. Film number 2, The Joker. And film number 3, Pokemon Detective Pikachu. So would either one of you gentlemen like to change your scores?
I'm going to change my. That's the audience score.
That is the audience score.
I'm going to change my audience score to 83%.
Ooh.
You said, okay, the audience scores were within 2% of this?
2% of those 3 movies, yep.
And it was Detective Pikachu,
The Joker, and Terminator Dark Fate.
I mean, when you say it like that, then I'll say 92%.
All right. So the critic score for The Sisters Brothers on Rotten Tomatoes, 87%. Chris, I think you were close. You had 83, I think you said. The audience score for The Sisters Brothers, 68%.
Oh.
Which is crazy to me because I feel like The Joker and Detective Pikachu should be higher than that.
Those movies.
Yeah. Terminator Dark Fate, not so much.
Dark Fate was the newer one.
Yeah, it's the one. Yeah,
Better than Genesis.
Where somehow the Terminator has aged despite the fact that he's a complete robot and
They
shouldn't be
explain
aging.
that.
Oh, good, because I haven't seen it. That's how horrible it looks. But
It's okay.
So I really appreciate you guys coming on the show. Thank you truly from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to do something like this. I really appreciate the faith that you guys have in me and letting me be a part of Don't Forget Towels, cinematic universe, if you will, radio universe, podcast universe. Before we go, one last thing I like to do on the show is it's a firm belief of the owners of, well, you guys, that everybody geeks out on something. And while it might not be comic books and movies, it may be woodworking and gardening. Who knows? But before we go, please tell the audience, what is it you guys are geeking out on now? Let's start with Chris.
I am geeking out on collecting a bunch of Empire Strikes Back 40th anniversary action figures and collectibles.
Nice. What do you got so far?
I have
Everything.
everything. I've gotten some Black Series figures on the Empire Strikes Back card. I just ordered my Celebration Empire Strikes Back 40th anniversary shirt. I like these baseball longer sleeve shirts. And amongst other things that I can't even think of right now.
Nice, man. What about you, Casey?
Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2.
Have you started playing yet?
I played it for a little bit this morning when my daughter went to bed, and I got rushed back 20 years in 2 seconds. It was the greatest fucking thing.
Well, that's great, guys. Again, I really appreciate it. Anything you guys want to plug before we sign off?
Listen to the other shows on this podcast network.
Yeah, check it out. And
don't forget to towel.com. Yeah.
Great, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Supposed to tell us if you're recording the call?
I'm recording the call. Did you forget?
Hey, there we go. Nope.
Did you forget?
No.
Yeah. Jacques Audiard's The Sisters Brothers. Chris, I think you hopping on in a second.
Yeah, he's probably just finishing dinner.
There he is. Oh, he's muted.
I am here. I'm here.
He's here.